There's some mistakes that I've made with my supplementation over the years. And this is all a process of learning what changes with the literature and also my own anecdotal experience. Jumping right into it, the first thing that I have changed when it comes down to my supplementation is when it comes to whey protein, I'm no longer limiting it at 30 grams. I used to think, okay, I can only absorb 30, maybe at the most 35 grams of protein in one sitting, especially with something that's as rapidly absorbing as whey protein. But the reality of it is, when you look at the literature, most people can consume and absorb upwards of 40, 50, even 60 grams of protein. Now, when it comes down to whey protein, it does absorb quicker. So there is the risk of less of it being utilized at one point in time. But I used to think that that extra protein would go to fat. Now, unless you are in a significant caloric surplus, that extra protein is likely not going to go to fat. Now, there's a couple other things we should look at. There was a cell metabolism study that indicated that we can consume and absorb a lot more protein in one sitting than we once thought. As a matter of fact, they consumed, in this study, upwards of 100 grams of protein, and they found that it was all still absorbed and utilized with increasing rates of muscle protein synthesis throughout the day. So the point is we can have larger amounts of protein. The question remains, is whey protein going to be okay because it rapidly absorbs? The short answer is probably not up to 100 grams, but you can probably safely consume more like 45, 50, maybe even 60 grams of protein, even from whey protein. So that's something that I've changed, which has granted me a lot more slack in my diet as the years have gone by. Quick reminder to drop a comment down below for the algorithm. It helps out a ton, and if you're new to this channel, please do hit that subscribe button. We have videos dropping every day. The second thing that I've changed is I do not have antioxidants post-workout. I couldn't understand why I wasn't feeling recovered for a number of years. Like, I would do my workout, I would have some vitamin C or echinacea post-workout because it made sense. I'm run down after a workout, that's when I would want to sort of help out my body, right? I'd help antioxidant capabilities after a workout would be great because I'm probably run down. What I didn't realize is that having those antioxidants was enabling my body. It was making it so that my body wasn't producing its own as much. So we've seen with the literature with non-steroidal anti-inflammatories that having NSAIDs after a workout blunts the inflammatory response. What we've just recently learned over the last few years is that having things like vitamin C and things like that post-workout actually blunt the body's ability to scavenge free radicals. You have oxidative stress that occurs during a workout for a reason. You want your body to have the ability to deal with it. You don't want to do it for the body. The next thing is I will never ever waste money again on thermogenic fat burning supplements. There are fat burning supplements that actually work. Okay, you want alpha adrenergic receptor blockers. Okay, these are things like yohimbine, things like raucine. They can make you feel wildly kind of antsy, but they do potentially work. They do work. Okay, as far as a fat burner is concerned, they're probably some of the only over-the-counter fat burners that actually work. And you only need a couple milligrams of stuff. Now, keep in mind, it might make you jittery, might make you restless. But the point is if you're looking for effective fat burners, it's probably the only ones outside of caffeine, right? So each time you kind of increase a stimulant, you're probably gonna get a fat burning effect. The thing with a thermogenic supplement is they claim to increase your core body temperature. Bottom line is most fat burning supplements on the market, I wouldn't bother with. The next up is I would not use any fancy versions of creatine. I used to think that using things like creatine hydrochloride or some of these other creatines that are out there in the market would make it so that I would have less water retention or I would have better effects because of better absorption. Here's the thing, some people do respond better with maybe less water retention with something like hydrochloride versus monohydrate, but there's no evidence to back that up. And personally, I don't notice a gigantic difference. Might be a smidge less water retention in the beginning, but if you stick on 10 or 15 grams of creatine a day, after about 2 weeks, it's gonna be 50% less of the water retention. After about a month, it's almost all gone. So the water retention goes away quite quickly, and monohydrate is about half the price in most cases. So I won't spend money on more expensive creatine trying to circumnavigate the water retention. The next thing is I will reduce the amount of fish oil that I take. I used to take a lot. I used to megadose fish oil. I used to sometimes, no joke, take like 7 to 10 grams per day of fish oil. I would really load up. Now I still like my fish oil. I still take maybe 2 to 3 grams per day. But what I had learned, and I learned this from a number of people, but Dr. Stephanie Van Watson really illustrated it well, that we still have this cell fragility. Like, we have a membrane that surrounds our cells. And that membrane becomes very fluid with fish oil, which is good because it allows for signal transduction, it allows for communication with the cell. But what we didn't realize is that that fragility or that membrane fluidity can actually be too much of a bad thing if it gets too fluid. So we need a certain level of cell rigidity. Now that cell rigidity is what protects the cell and keeps it from becoming so oxidized and prevents this thing called ferroptosis, which can be sort of a downstream effect of basically too much oxidative stress and too much iron buildup and therefore more oxidative. It's kind of complicated. Bottom line is that fish oil is still amazing, cardiovascular benefit, but I've reduced my dose significantly, and I've added in something called C15 fat, because that provides that structural integrity to the cell that I'm looking for. So it's a balance of having the cell fluidity and the cell structure and strength that I want. So increasing the membrane structure and decreasing the fragility, thereby reducing the risk of oxidation and allowing the cell to be a little bit stronger. The one that I use is called Fatty 15. They are really the ones that pioneered a lot of the research with C15, finding that C15 is a fat that we're actually deficient in. And there are a lot of people that are deficient in this fat that you can get from dairy fat, you can get it from hard-aged cheeses, but I also get it from a supplement called Fatty 15. So that link down below is for 15% off. Go to fatty15.com/Thomas. Again, fatty15.com/Thomas, and it gets you 15% off. I highly recommend you try this out. From a longevity perspective, it makes a lot of sense that we want to have more structurally sound cells. The sixth mistake that I've made, I will no longer take carnitine on days I'm not working out or when I'm not in a heavy training block. What I've learned is that carnitine is highly effective at shuttling fat into the mitochondria. It increases carnitine, and that whole pathway is called the carnitine palmitoyl transferase pathway. So you need carnitine to shuttle fat into the mitochondria. The problem is the literature shows that we only really become deficient in carnitine when we're training a lot. Most people aren't deficient in carnitine, but once your training volume is up, about 80% of people become deficient in carnitine. So it's a waste of money to take when you're not training. It's also a waste of money to try to time it in any particular way. Really, it's more about just blood levels of carnitine in the first place. So you can kind of take it whenever. Now, if you are someone that is using specific kinds of carnitine, yeah, there might be a timing benefit. There might be a slight benefit to take it in a fasted state, but realistically, it's more just about having consistent levels of carnitine. The other mistake that I've made that I'm really glad that I changed, because it saved me a lot of money and it's also helped my gut health a lot, is I am no longer only a fan of whey protein isolate. I am now a fan of whey protein concentrate too. And for years I said isolate's the way to go because the protein is isolated from the whey and it's pure protein. The concentrate has some of the milk solids, some of the other things. What I left out and what I didn't realize is that whey protein concentrate doesn't just have milk solids, but it has lactoferrin and it has some of the other compounds that are in whole solid milk that give us a lot of intestinal benefit and also can help slow the digestion of the whey protein just a tad so that we might get better absorption. The only downside is that it's going to affect people that are lactose intolerant. That's the only downside. So if you're not lactose intolerant, whey protein concentrate can be highly beneficial. Still a fan of whey protein isolate in a time when I just need pure unadulterated protein. I think of whey protein concentrate as more of a food and whey protein isolate as more of a supplement, if that makes sense. The next big mistake that I will never make again is avoiding taking vitamin D at night. For a long time, I drank the Kool-Aid thinking that vitamin D is something you'd get during the day, so taking it at night would actually have a detrimental effect. Might even keep you awake and decrease absorption. It takes a significant amount of time for UVA and UVB light to ultimately do its job and essentially convert into vitamin D. So by the time it reaches vitamin D, it's been hours, and you have a sustained release going throughout the day and potentially into the night. So it has no effect on circadian rhythm. Vitamin D is the downstream effect of light. It's not the actual light itself. You don't look at the sun and just get vitamin D, plain and simple. Okay, you're converting light. You're converting the UVB. You're converting these lights into actual vitamin D. So with that, I no longer worry about it. But I also am not a big fan of vitamin D. I have abandoned vitamin D years ago in place of cod liver oil because I realized that I get enough vitamin D from my diet and the sun. All I need is to kind of level it off. So cod liver oil, I'm getting vitamin D, vitamin A, and omega-3s. And the vitamin A helps with what is called the balancing and the pro-resolving mediators associated with vitamin D. So you're not having unopposed vitamin D in an unnatural sort of sense. The next mistake that I won't make anymore is I will not shame glutamine. I bashed glutamine before because from a muscle building perspective, it is way overhyped, way over talked about, way overhyped. It's not going to help you build muscle. It's a very available amino acid. But when our gut is compromised or when we are training a lot or highly stressed, we do deplete glutamine mainly in the gut. So having glutamine can restore gut barrier integrity, but it can also help provide a pool that allows for us to create GABA. Okay, so GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, is really important. It's the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, the brakes of our brain to make our brain slow down and not go warp speed crazy, right? So if we have enough glutamine on hand, our brain can actually operate the way it needs to. But more importantly than that, right out the gate, we're protecting our gut and sealing our gut. So I won't shame glutamine, I'll use it 5 to 10 grams, especially on days when I'm doing more than an hour of cardio. The next mistake I won't make anymore is I will cycle 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptophan. Great if you want to feel calm, great if you want that kind of low, steady stream of serotonin. Some people find it helps them sleep, helps them stay a little calmer. The thing is, I realized that I was needing more and more and more to get the job done. And when I would take the 5-HTP out, I would actually get kind of restless and feel like I wasn't getting enough serotonin. I'd feel kind of anxious. I wasn't getting that complacency in certain areas that I would want. You don't want to be a complacent person all the time, but you kind of want to be complacent to a certain degree when you're sleeping, right? You don't want to be waking up being like, my taxes. You'd rather be like, all right, I'll deal with my taxes tomorrow, back to sleep, right? So I've found that simply going low dose on 5-HTP, things like 50 milligrams versus 100, is perfect. And if I get the actual tabs, sometimes I'll even drop down to 25, and then I'll take a couple weeks off. And it has made my life so much better. I don't have these ups and downs I was noticing with 5-HTP. The next thing, I will not overuse Kava or GABA supplements. I learned that GABA doesn't even cross the blood-brain barrier in most people. So taking GABA to calm your brain isn't really doing much. I love Kava and I will still use Kava, but I won't use it all the time because Kava does affect the GABAergic system. The problem is that you can build up a tolerance just like you can with alcohol. Alcohol is also GABAergic. It allows your brain to calm down, but you have a GABA rebound. Okay, so it comes back down later and you end up having a glutamate spike, and that kind of can make you feel amped and make you feel off, but also you are building a tolerance. So what you want to look for is you want to look for things that have what's called nicotinyl GABA. That's GABA bound to B3, which can allow for better utilization and crossing the blood-brain barrier. Okay, you also just want to cycle it on and off here and there so that you're not getting totally hooked on it. The last thing that I have changed my mind on when it comes to supplements is collagen. I, before, was just a fan of using collagen for gut health. I really enjoyed the benefits there, and there's good evidence there. But now the evidence, and I had Dr. Mike Ormsby on my channel, and he talked about this, collagen is quite powerful when it comes down to connective tissue protein synthesis, actually healing the connective tissue, which gets damaged just the same way muscle does when we work out. So having collagen pre-workout, or just getting enough collagen throughout the day, can actually benefit your connective tissue. And we've seen evidence with the Achilles heel, or Achilles tendon rather, and Dr. Mike Ormsby's work in his own study demonstrated that people that used collagen saw improvements and subjective improvements in their connective tissue and their joint health. There is legitimately something there. We just have to unfold a little bit more of what's going on. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.